What's up, Addicts? I'm Josh, and today we're back with another episode-by-episode review, this time talking about The Walking Dead Season 9, Episode 5, and holy shit, was this a good episode. I had little expectations that this episode was going to be able to pull off Rick's final story, especially with the ending of the last episode, but I really think they did well. I think it was really good. There was a lot of different stuff they did right, and it's got me excited for the future. So let's just dive right into it. In this episode, we get a lot of like callbacks and homages to the older seasons, past events and characters, and I think they did that really well. So just jumping in, we get to see that Rick, he's trying to still divert the Walker herd, and in his attempt at that, he's fading in and out of like consciousness and hallucinations, and they're kind of like it's not so much like he's seeing like death at its doorstep, but he's just sitting there, and well, I guess it kind of is, because as he's quote unquote dying, he's looking for his family, and you think he's looking for the family that dies, Carl, Lori, but by the end of it, we see it's the family that he's come to know along the way and who's still with him, which in those some of the callback scenes, we get the hospital. That's about the first one where we get to see him seeing his older self in the hospital bed and telling himself to wake up, and the transitions they have between all these hallucinations, both when they're coming into it and then coming out of it, are really great. There is a part where I think it's in the same scene where he's telling himself to wake up. He looks outside the hospital window and he sees helicopters. It looks like they're a swarm of birds, but then they turn into helicopters. And you could say this can symbolize a couple different things, like whether it's the city strike that happened in like season 1. I think it's more of like he sees the current helicopter in the series, or at least that's kind of how I take it. The other thing is like, I thought the way that they had him get off of the rebar that he's impaled to, it's like one of those things where I don't know if he'd be able to lift himself up high enough or by himself, or I was thinking, how is he going to be able to do that by himself? But they ended up doing it in a semi-believable way. I mean, with the camera work they did, I think it's believable, where he takes his belt and uses it as a pulley to lift himself up. And while, we're getting glimpse of Rick and his, happy illusions, we get to see Jadis. She's trying to escape in a car that shuts down, and she's talking to somebody on the radio, which, I'll be honest with you, I fucking kicked myself in the face for not doing this, but I had a prediction that I thought of like after I did my review for episode 4 and before I watched this episode. I had a prediction of a possible thing like, they might go this route, and it ended up being pretty close, and so I was pissed I didn't get it on recording, but it's alright now. I can't, it's like, nobody would believe me if I claimed it, but, so we get to see that she's trying to make a deal, be like, yeah, I still have an A, I'm gonna bring it to you, and obviously her plan is, since she doesn't have Gabriel anymore, she's just gonna try to hijack the helicopter, and so she's making her way onto that rendezvous point. We get to see that, there's like, again, we get to go back with Rick, and there's another one where it's like he comes to this cabin where it has on the outside "Can't face me, asshole," and I feel like the way it was done, it kind of looks like the hospital door, but it's also triggers his hallucination for when he's with Shane, and it's kind of like it starts off with like Shane as like his season 1 kind of self, but then it kind of transitions into his season 2 personality, and I thought there was a lot of good things, because we get to see, I don't know if it's necessarily like confirmation, but it's mainly confirmation in like Rick's thinking that he believes that Judith is Shane's daughter, which I'm pretty sure that's literal, but in like, if you look at like the timeline and everything, but we know that at least in his mind, that's what he believes, but he's claiming it as his own. And there's a really good back and forth with Shane and Rick, especially with saying that, like, you're looking for your family, but really though it was my family and you like took it away from me, and so that was like a good interaction. There's also a part where Shane's like, you know, in order to get past this you need to become like the Rick that was all crazy, you know, like the one with the red machete and everything. There's just a lot of mini interactions. I won't go into detail in case you want to go see it if you haven't already, but it's really great. And also I really like, this is just an example of the transitions that they used, but when he's talking with Shane and Shane like gets into Rick's face, and then it like transitions into like Rick sitting in the cabin and there's like a walker like rushing at him and he has to dodge out of the way. Those are just like little transitions I think really help, because like, you know, you're in the same situation, or you try to place yourself, I'm not going to go into detail, but you know what I mean, like whatever your hallucination is, it kind of resembles whatever your current surrounding is, if that makes sense. I don't know if the explanation makes sense. But anyway, I was also, like, when he's getting out of the cabin, it kind of made me think it resembled the Tank a little bit from Season 1, where he's having to go through a really small crawl space to get rid of the walkers. It kind of made me think of the Tank. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but I thought that was a really neat thing if it was. Now, we actually, at this point, we get to take a break from Rick, and we get to see what's going down at Alexandria with Maggie showing up to kill Negan. And with this, we get to see that she goes straight to the prison, but before she can actually get inside, Michonne's sitting there waiting for her, because Michonne got told from another guy that Maggie had showed up, and so she was able to get there faster. And they have an interaction where, you know, it's kind of the same thing we've been seeing. Maggie's like, I can't live on. We got to do this so it can be finito. And Michonne's like, no, you know, like, if this isn't going to change anything, blah, blah, blah. And in that kind of back and forth, we do get confirmation that it is a year and a half between the end of the war and now, which I don't remember what I said my prediction was for the 10th. I think I'm kind of close. But anyway, I thought that was interesting to note because this, as I'll talk about later on, this is kind of like a midway to the new beginning. I'll go into detail about that. But also, we can see that Michonne breaks down and actually gives her the key because she can't think of any other points to, you know, back up her standing. So she gives Maggie the keys so she can go in. And I'll be honest, this was probably the weakest part out of the entire episode. This was the only part that I didn't really like. And it's mainly just because, I don't know, like the timing and just like the development of Negan, like it's all off. And it's not to Jeffrey D. Morgan because he's a great actor, but it's something about it just feels rushed, or I don't know. Like I get, it was unfortunate that they were forced to do these kind of circumstances now and not later, because there was just so much going on that they didn't really have time to develop this where it had any meaning. But we got it. She basically learns that Negan is suffering more being alive away from Lucille than if he was to be killed, because that's what his desire is to be with his dead wife. And so she decides to let him live, which I do like that. That's what happened in the comic, basically, but there was a lot of different things that happened before that, and the setup was a lot better. I'm not saying it was perfect, because there is a couple things that the show does in Negan and Maggie's interactions that I think are a little bit better than the comic, but for this specific scene that they're trying to mirror from the book, I think the comic did it better. But that's just me. That scene starts off fine. I would say even it's good. It's not great, but it's definitely good. But then it fizzles out really fast. Another thing, we get back with Rick and seeing more of him, which is great, because that was one of the things I was worried about, that they're not going to show Rick enough in this episode, but they are. And one of the things I kind of thought was a little odd was, you know, Rick still has his radio, at least I'm pretty sure, unless he lost it when he was in the scuffle with Daryl, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case, because I don't remember them making a note of that. So I was really curious on, like, why Rick hadn't been using his radio when he was. I mean, I get it, because it's like, you know, he's got like 1,000 walkers behind him and he's bleeding out. So I mean, yeah, you probably aren't thinking straight to do that. But it was just one thing I was like, interesting. But in this interaction, we see that he's on the horse and he's riding off again, and he's kind of fading out of consciousness again, and we get to see Herschel and the farm, which, oh my gosh, I love seeing Herschel. I didn't actually realize that Scott Wilson passed away early in October this year, so rest in peace to Scott Wilson. And I thought it made the scene even more impactful because he's actually gone now. But we get to see, there's a statement that Herschel makes, and he says, we all get there eventually. And I think that transitions again beautifully, because the very next interaction that we see is with Rick back in the hospital in Atlanta, and he's going down the hallway and he says, "Don't open dead inside." And when he opens that, it's the sea of bodies, and it's like, and then there's I guess an interaction between him and Sasha. And I guess this is, to me, it feels like that's the thing that they're mirroring, like they all get here eventually, because eventually, you know, we all pass away. And I will say though, well, I guess before I say that, when he's walking to the "Don't Open Dead Inside," there's this constant phrase that keeps saying, and it's, I have to write it down because "What's your wound?" And at first, in the earlier hallucinations, it changes like who's saying it. First, it's Morgan, and I'm pretty sure Morgan actually did say that when he met Rick in season 1, which I thought that was really good because, you know, it's right when he's looking at the wound that he got in his side from the rebar. But as it goes on, it transitions, and in this last one, right before he opens the doors, it sounds like the helicopter man's voice. And so immediately and this was kind of my prediction that I said I didn't get to share with you guys, was that Jadis might take Rick on the helicopter in substitute of, you know, whatever else she was thinking about taking. And I believe that, if I'm right, I could be hearing wrong, but it sounded like the guy, and I was thinking, well, maybe he's on the helicopter and he's just at this point. But it doesn't really, I don't think that's what it is, because when we get out of this, he's still on the horse and stuff. So, but it did sound that. Let me, you guys know if you think it's who it sounded like, because I know the voice, we heard that voice before, but I couldn't picture it in this instance. But anyway, when we get with Sasha, I like some things that she said, but there was another thing that she said that it just felt like AMC was like, they were just like, The Walking Dead isn't about Rick, but it's about the group and like everybody in the group, which, I mean, that's kind of like the underlying thing I got, which I guess that makes sense that they're wanting to transition that if Rick's going to be gone and we're going to be focusing on the characters. But still, though, I thought that part of her speech was kind of weak, but at the very beginning when she's talking about, you know, how like when people lay down their lives, it makes the people that are still there stronger and being able to get through more circumstances. So I do like that kind of back and forth with her. And after he gets out of this hallucination, he goes into, he comes back out, he snaps out of it, he falls off the horse, and that's what snaps him back into the dire situation that he is in, and he winds up at the bridge camp, and we don't know exactly yet what all popped off, but there is people that have been freshly killed, and they're coming back as walkers, and it didn't look like anybody was, like from the Kingdom or Hilltop that were walkers. It looked like they were all saviors, so I'm assuming that somehow Carol and the rest of them were able to kill all the saviors that are coming. Still don't have confirmation of that. We probably won't know until like the next episode or later on in the season, but that was just a little bit of a note. But we get to see that Rick has some close calls again, and he decides that instead of having the herd go towards Hilltop, he's going to divert them onto the bridge and hopefully have the bridge collapse, consuming all of the walkers into the river. And it's at this point that I feel like it reminds me so much of how Kill or Be Killed ended. If you guys watch our comic review of it, shows this scene of like how it could end, and then it's like, nope, psych, we didn't, because we get when he gets onto the bridge, we see like everybody shows up on the opposite side of the bridge of where he's like in the direction that he's walking. And they come and they start killing all the walkers. And Michonne, gets down, talks to Rick, and gives him the Andrea quote from the comic, where it's like, "I picked you because you're strong, and we don't die." And I liked that too. But I did like how they're like, "Nope, this is another hallucination." And she's like, "Wake up," and he wakes up, and he's like, "Oh, nobody's here." and he looks back at the bridge, and the bridge is actually holding the weight, and so he's like, no, this is not how it's going to go. And it is at this point that we actually do see the rest of the group show up, because one thing I forgot to mention is that after Maggie decided not to kill Negan, there was a person with a radio that came to Michonne and Maggie and told them that something bad had happened. And so that what leads them to this, and they come, and they're not close to the bridge at all. They're like on one of the banks on the opposite side. I guess they're on the side where the herd's coming from, which actually doesn't make any sense, because this other side is where Alexandria was, and that's where everybody was at. But anyway, that's, I guess, a little plot hole, or maybe it's just the way it looks. But we get to see that they're going to try to divert the herd, and Rick's like, no, I don't want you to sacrifice. I don't want you to sacrifice any of you for me, because I'm already, fucked up. And he decides that he is going to take down the bridge by force, where they have some dynamite or explosives that they were using with the construction, and he actually shoots that, and it blows up the bridge. And everybody sees Rick die. And I think probably the reaction that hit me the heaviest was Daryl, and his performance is great. And not to say that Michonne's wasn't believable, because all of them, have really good reactions. But the one with Daryl really hit me, because I think with Daryl, because he had this conflict, and he has gotten other characters killed, Glenn, and I think you can just see the sorrow in his face, and he just walks off into the forest, not believing what he saw. And I really like that reaction. At the very end, we do get to see that there is a twist ending. There is an open-ended ending, which was another thing I thought they might do, but again, didn't share it. But we get to see that Rick fell into the river, and he's washed up on a bank, conveniently right where Jadis is supposed to be meeting the helicopter, and she sees Rick on the bank, and he's still moving, so he's still alive. And the helicopter is saying, do you have our A? And she's like, no, but I have a B. And she was like, I was going to trick you, but I just want to save a friend now. Will you please help us? And the helicopter's like, well, I guess I'm already here. So he lands, they get Rick on there, and Rick is seemingly alive. He doesn't seem like he's going to die or anything, because Jadis is like, we saved you. And he rides off into the sunset. And I love how they do the terrain, too. It's another great shot where we see that a lot of time has passed. We get another time skip, which is kind of like what I mentioned earlier. We get to see that it's really odd, because in the first episode of this season, they call it New Beginnings, which I love when they do stuff like that in the titles. But it's not truly a time skip, because these first 4 episodes have been kind of a midway time skip, because I can see why they did this now. But they kind of, because in the comic, let me rephrase this. In the comic, it was about maybe 3 to 4 years of time that it had elapsed since the war ended. But in this one, since there was extra conflicts and remixed stories, they decided that needed to be done before they got to the bulk of the new character, or the new villains, I should say, and some new characters. And so they have a year and a half. And then I'm assuming it's going to be maybe another year and a half, maybe 2. And this is where the true new beginning begins. And we get to see Magna's group at the very end of this episode, which I think the way they transitioned that is really great, because we see Rick riding off. You see that the world around elapses in time. We see that a lot of growth has happened. The building that's there is more dilapidated. And we can see that Magna and her group is fighting against walkers to try to stay alive. And there's another thing that happens that I'm kind of iffy on, to be honest. But we get to see that they're about to be surrounded. Somebody comes out of nowhere, starts shooting down the walkers, and it's like, come to me. And they run to the forest of safety, and they see a older Judith. Not grown-up Judith, but older Judith. So probably, I don't know. I'm bad at ages with kids, but I'd say maybe 7. Maybe. I don't know. That's really hard to say. Maybe more like 5, but it's small enough that Rick's python looks like a mini rifle in her hand. That's how small she is. But This is actually kind of adorable, though, because we get that she is wearing Rick's hat. She has Rick's python, but she also has like a little short sword, kind of like Michonne's. And she's like introducing herself, and she's like, "I'll take care of you." And so that's how the episode ends. And getting into what I thought about, I thought this was a really good episode. I know it's a little bit of a cop-out for AMC to be like, this is Rick Grimes' last episode, and then he doesn't die. But I actually do like it because I think this story, at least right now, or I don't know, maybe just in general, I don't see it going well without Rick, and it just didn't feel like the time yet anyway. And so I think I'm okay with them having it to where it's kind of a clickbaity type advertising, but it just makes me more intrigued to see what they're going to do, because there's a lot of things that are going to switch up, and it actually is more believable with the way they had it done. There's a lot of things that I questioned in the previous episodes that I see why they did it now, because of the direction they decided to go. And I do like how everything paid off at the end. I think the big kicker is going to be how developed the the older characters are into newer roles, and then how intriguing the new characters are going to be with a remixed story. We don't really know who's going to be the leader of Alexandria, but I assume it's going to be Michonne, which not too excited about that, but because I think she's more of a fighter than anything, and I'm sorry that thing going off, but we'll see how it goes, because I think they can do it pretty well, because Michonne is a badass. I think this also is going to be really cool, because we actually get new looks for characters. Specifically, one that looks completely different is Carol. We can see that she's more like Legolas, or is that right? Legolas from Lord of the Rings. She looks like that in the preview. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to see what they do. It looks like they say in the next 3 episodes was the little preview we got, and so we are going to get the Magna coming into the group and the Whisperer's introduction in these next 3 episodes. And I love how they're playing off the Whisperers at the moment with them. Well, I won't say too much unless if you're a TV only watcher, but there is a lot of interesting things I think is going to surprise people, because the way they're doing it, because I was afraid that they were going to reveal too much and take away the big reveal, but it looks like they're going an avenue that's going to be a shock for the TV only fans, so I'm glad to see them go that route and not give away any big things. I think probably the most troublesome thing going forward is Negan, just because, to be honest with you, there's nothing interesting about his character at the moment. In the comic, I won't say he's always important, or we need to see him all the time, but when he is in the comic, it is intriguing, and it's nice watching how he interacts with the story that's going on and how he's a part of it. But in the show, I don't know. There's really nothing that I think we could see that I think will be done right or interesting, but that just leaves it open for the remixes. So I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess I should say, about Negan. But going forward, I really want to see what Daryl's going to do. I think Daryl at the moment, and at least without Rick, now that Rick is gone, Daryl's the most interesting character. I hope to see maybe Dwight back. I don't know if we will or not, but he's probably like my third favorite character in the comics, so I hope to see that he's back and doing something. But yeah, I guess that's basically all for this episode / recap review, but I hope to be back very soon. I got the Walking Dead comic on the way, I think, so I should be able to do that review soon. And unfortunately, we will have to push back our comic stuff another week, or maybe have something out by Friday. We'll just have to see. But we will have Die, The Realm, The Walking Dead, and a few other surprises. So, without further ado, I will see you guys in the next episode where the new beginning finally starts. So, anyway, guys, I'll catch you later. And if you haven't watched the episode already, I highly recommend it. It was probably the best episode of the season so far. Maybe not best. Well, to me, fuck it. I'll say it. It was. So, now it's time for you guys to see if I'm full of shit. So, see you later.